The key to understanding evil. If you wish to understand the world and the events, both historic and recent, that brought us to this point, you need to understand evil. Let's make clear what evil is not. Evil is not a man. No matter how bad a person is, he never epitomizes evil. Men are bad and what they do is evil. The man himself is not evil personified. To equate evil with a human being does injustice to evil and only makes it more difficult to deal with. It also desensitizes us to evil and even trivializes it to some degree, since man after man is held up as the face of evil. Satan is evil, humans are demonic. Evil is not something we get to attach to what we find repulsive. Evil is not something we get to define by the impact it has on us. An act is not evil because it impacts us in a seriously negative way. Evil is not a measure of how much your life has been harmed or disrupted. Evil is not something that happens when God diverts his attention from you for a period. Evil is not a sign that God let you down unless an indication that he does not exist. Evil is not something that happens to evil persons or those who deserve it. Evil is neutral as to whom it impacts. Indeed, if evil only impacted evil persons, it would not be evil, it would be justice. Indeed, evil has to be random and unpredictable, or it would not be evil. If it was predictable, it would be a natural law operating. The key to understanding evil is to understand evil is antithetical to God, and that without God evil would not exist, and indeed, without God, evil would be a meaningless term. One can only have infinite bad if absolute good exists. However, evil is not the equal and opposite of God. Evil is not inversely related to God in any real sense. Evil is the moral opposite of God, not the categorical opposite. So, the devil is not equal to God in power. Evil cannot challenge and certainly cannot overcome God. Evil is not something God created. Indeed, evil is not created. This is a serious mistake many people make. They think God made evil as he made light in the trees. God creates evil only in the sense that it is impeccable goodness that enables us to see evil for what it is. Without God, evil would be an incoherent. One cannot even have a concept of wrong, without a clear idea of what the right is, and indeed, we need a sense of absolute right. There must be clarity on the objective to understand where the trajectory is a kilter. The problem is, as our ideas about God are muddied, our concept of evil becomes relativized and even trivialized. When everything is evil, nothing is evil. God must be transcendent to make evil recognizable. Therein is the dilemma. We think evil opposes God and we think God does not exist. So, all we have is a mundane nuisance parading around as evil incarnate. It's a world in which even pedophilia can become trivialized. If the perpetrator is sick, then the act is a symptom of a disease and nothing to do with evil. The perpetrator is not only someone to be sympathized with but also someone with whom we need to learn not to react with horror to the symptoms of his malady, which is to sexually abuse kids. Sexual education is largely to prepare children for the eventual abuse, in order that it might not have a negative impact on them, or their parents. What is evil if it is a mundane occurrence familiar to all of us? Therefore, evil is largely the extent to which an event goes beyond what is legally allowed. If we can demonstrate an act, seen by us as perfidious, is actually permitted elsewhere, then a migrant from that culture might be permitted a lapse in judgment, not being familiar with our particular statement of what is legally permissible. Even if this involves the rape of minors. Perhaps the only thing the modern liberal cannot get around is murder. Everything else seems to have been legitimized, at least for some if not for all. The law is only good if it protects our freedoms, and the more freedoms we can find to protect, the fewer the laws needed. Oddly, perhaps, if we have total freedom, we no longer need any laws. It is only when the freedoms are rare and few, we need extensive laws to ensure they are not infringed upon. The right to property is a right that causes large numbers of laws to be enacted. Nationalize everything and make it all public property. There is no need for these laws. The community becomes more law-abiding and fewer laws are broken because there are virtually no laws to enforce. We are required to tolerate everything. After all, if the law cannot be configured to make a behavior impermissible, or the law has not been fashioned in a way to make an act specifically illegal, then the act has to be permissible, and if a behavior is permissible from the point of view of the regulatory system, then us refusing to tolerate it makes us bigots. Of we are not under the law, we are under grace. But who is we? It is an important question. We are saved by faith, not by works, and yet what is faith if we remain under the law? We claim we are living in faith and not the law, but that can be difficult to believe when we are governed in every part of our life by the law. Do we even understand what it might mean to live in faith, accepting that faith and law exist in an inverse relationship? This question can be resolved by remembering that being under the law homogenizes everyone. But this might cause many to question what this even means. How do we homogenize identities? Some years ago, this might have been harder to answer, but in this time of intersectionality and increased tribalism, the process is better understood. Democracy tribalizes people and, over time, aggregates them into two basic groups, the right and the left. Many might decry this division, but this increased polarization is a diversion, not the real issue. What is actually happening is not an increased polarization but decreased individuality. We are no longer individuals, but liberals or conservative, and we are expected to live by these labels, primarily if we are on the left, the avowed defenders of democracy. But is conservative who we are? It reflects a few basic assumptions, but these assumptions do not hold good for all conservatives. Even if we are opposed to illegal immigration, this can be expressed in different ways. In fact, no one is willing to let everyone in, regardless of who they are. No one is going to prevent everyone from coming in, regardless of who they are. So, between these two extremes, we all are found. Conservatives are generally found clustered around one extreme and liberals are clustered around the other. Probably the majority of both left and right are closer to the middle than they are to either extreme. But there are many issues that cannot be simply divided at the same place according to which party one supports. Much nuance is lost in the two-party system. Interestingly, democracy is ill-suited to a multiplicity of parties. And if we get to where there are no parties and everyone has a personal vote, democracy becomes so unwieldy nothing gets decided. We must individuate, and that means at a minimum, paying our own costs, justifying to others who we are. Individuality is not consistent with politics. Democracy is not workable with economics. Try and make a lie out of this statement. Imagine a market in which every transaction was the result of a democratic vote. It would be as unworkable as direct democracy, because in the end, we are talking about the same thing. When we vote, we are voting on economic transactions. Every policy proposal is an economic one. For your information, and to be clear, the division is between church and state. The state, to hide its antipathy for the church, diverts attention to a conflict between economics and politics. These are proxies. They are not the real battle, but the right and left fight over free markets versus socialism, and they fight over liberal policies versus conservative ones. No one fights for the church as an enemy of the state. Yet, why is that? Why is democracy evil and the church good? It is because voting on X will not produce X. X, whatever it is, has to be produced by labor. Democracy does no work. It produces nothing and so has not moral authority. We can measure good by the value we create through work. We can measure evil by the value we consume that is not compensated for by the work we do, and the value we create. It is that simple. Freeloading is evil, working for what we want is good.